Chapter 1. Stormy encounters. Nathaniel Westbrook's sleek black car sliced through the winding roads of Willow Creek, if he were in a race against time. His eyes were fixed ahead, dismissing the quaint town around him as nothing more than a speed bump on his path to bigger ventures. This was just a stop part of his latest business exploration. The small, charming town wasn't even on his radar until his company scouted the area for possible expansion. The thought of it was laughable. He needed to get in and out quickly. But then the storm hit. Thunder rumbled ominously overhead as a wall of rain began to pour, the droplets dancing against his car's windshield, blurring his view. He cursed under his breath, his irritation rising with each passing minute. He had hoped to finish his visit quickly, to grab some local intel and leave. Now, the storm had him trapped. His phone buzzed, but the signal was patchy at best. He sighed, pulling over to the side of the road. The towering trees lining the route groaned as the wind howled. Willow Creek wasn't exactly prepared for a storm like this. He glanced around, spotting a cozy, warm light glowing from the window of a small restaurant. It was called the Savory Spoon, a name that sounded as insipid as everything else in this sleepy town. But it was his only option. Nathaniel strode into the restaurant, the bell above the door chiming softly. The warm scent of home-cooked food hit him instantly, a far cry from the sterile, perfectly controlled environments he was used to. Lily was behind the counter, her back to him as she plated a dish. Her movements were graceful, instinctive, like she had been doing this her whole life. Nathaniel cleared his throat, expecting her to greet him. She didn't. "Excuse me," he said, his tone sharp, as if his presence alone should have commanded attention. She turned around slowly, eyes narrowing as she took in his tailored suit, his perfectly combed hair, and the slight sneer on his face. He didn't belong here. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cool, but the edge of curiosity was there. "I need a place to wait out the storm," Nathaniel said, glancing around the empty space. "Are you open?" Lily gave him a once-over before nodding, gesturing toward an empty table near the window. She returned to her work, ignoring him, but not entirely. She couldn't help but notice the way he stood confident, like he owned the world. Nathaniel sat down, his eyes scanning the rustic interior. It was quaint, too quaint. The mismatched chairs, the wooden tables, the hand-painted signs, everything screamed small town. Lily placed a steaming bowl of soup in front of him without a word. Nathaniel stared at it, the steam rising in soft curls. He wanted to reject it, but his stomach growled, reminding him that he had no choice. He tasted it, reluctantly at first, and was immediately surprised. The flavors were bold, complex, nothing like the flavorless gourmet dishes he was accustomed to. It wasn't refined, it was real. His brow furrowed. "This is good," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Lily paused, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter. "You're welcome," she said, the words almost sarcastic, her eyes not meeting his. Nathaniel noticed the sharpness in her tone, but said nothing. There was something about her quiet confidence, the way she carried herself, that intrigued him. He wasn't used to people who didn't bend at the slightest whiff of his presence. She continued working, seemingly uninterested in him, but Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this place than met the eye. It wasn't just the food. It was something deeper, something that drew him in. As the storm raged outside, he found himself captivated not by the town, but by the woman behind the counter. This was not part of the plan. Chapter 2. Unexpected shelter. Storm was relentless, a roaring beast that didn't seem ready to let up anytime soon. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, trying to keep the growing sense of discomfort at bay. He hadn't expected to be here for so long. And yet, as the rain hammered against the windows, he realized he was stuck. The last thing he wanted was to be stranded in a sleepy town like Willow Creek, surrounded by people who seemed to have no ambition beyond their little corner of the world. But here he was. Lily hadn't acknowledged his presence in what felt like hours, focusing entirely on her work. She moved with such fluidity, every motion purposeful, almost as if she was unaware of anyone else in the room. It was fascinating, in a way. He was used to people catering to his every whim, eager to please. But here, in this small restaurant, she was different. Her hands worked quickly as she plated another dish, her brow furrowed in concentration. Nathaniel couldn't help but watch her, a strange pull drawing his attention. It wasn't just her skill, it was the way she carried herself. The quiet authority she exuded without saying a word. "You're still here," she remarked, her voice breaking the silence like a pebble dropped into still water. He blinked, snapping out of his thoughts. "I don't have much choice," he replied, the words coming out more curt than he intended. "The storm isn't letting up," she nodded, her eyes briefly meeting his before returning to the task at hand. "I figured," she said. "It's going to be a while before the roads clear up. You might as well get comfortable." Her tone wasn't unkind, but there was a certain coolness to it, a guardedness that intrigued Nathaniel even more. In his world, people were always eager to please him, to get close to him for one reason or another. But Lily, she seemed unaffected by his presence, as though he were just another customer, no more important than the next. He shifted in his seat, glancing around the restaurant again. The warmth of the place was starting to sink in, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environments he was used to. There was a quiet charm here, in the simplicity of the food and the genuine care Lily put into every dish. It was the kind of place he would never have given a second glance before, but now, with no other options, he found himself oddly comfortable. "I'll need a room for the night," Nathaniel said, breaking the silence once more. "Is there anywhere nearby?" Lily paused, glancing over at him. "There's the inn down the road, but it's probably full with the storm and all. You might be better off staying here." "Here?" Nathaniel's eyebrow quirked, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "In a restaurant?" Lily shrugged. "You're welcome to leave and brave the storm if you'd rather, but you're not getting far." He didn't respond right away, the idea of staying in the restaurant rubbing him the wrong way. But the thought of driving in that downpour again seemed even worse. The tension in the air was palpable, but something about the way she spoke made him reconsider. "I suppose that's my only option," he muttered under his breath. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You're welcome to make yourself comfortable," she said, her voice softer than before. "I'll grab you a blanket." Nathaniel watched as she moved around the room, her movements fluid and confident. He couldn't quite explain it, but there was something about her that was disarming. For once, he didn't feel like he was the one in control, the one calling all the shots. And, for reasons he couldn't understand, it didn't bother him as much as it should have. Lily returned with a thick, knitted blanket, the kind you'd expect to find in a home, not a restaurant. She placed it on the back of his chair with a quiet grace, her eyes meeting his for just a moment before she turned away. "Thanks," he said, his voice low. He hadn't expected her to be so accommodating. "I'm not doing this for you," she replied, her words sharp, but not unkind. "I'm doing it because the storm's not letting up, and you'll be miserable if you try to leave. But don't get comfortable. This isn't a hotel." Nathaniel chuckled softly, a genuine laugh that surprised even him. "I wouldn't dream of overstaying my welcome." For a fleeting moment, their eyes met again, and Nathaniel saw something in her gaze, a flicker of something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. But before he could dwell on it, she was already walking back to the kitchen, leaving him alone with his thoughts. It wasn't what he had planned for the night. But as the storm raged on outside, Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that this small town, and this woman, might just be the unexpected turn his life needed. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't so sure about his next move. Chapter 3. A taste of humility. The storm was relentless, a roaring crescendo of wind and rain that showed no sign of letting up. Nathaniel sat back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of the wooden table, the sound of the storm outside blending with the soft clinks and clatters in the kitchen. He glanced out the window, watching the rain hammer against the glass, feeling an unfamiliar tension in the air. His mind was occupied, but not with the business he'd come here to scout. No, it was something else, something about this place, this moment, and the woman who was so effortlessly in control of it all. Lily moved about the kitchen, a quiet flurry of activity. He had noticed her dedication before, the way she handled each task with a precision that spoke of years of experience. He had seen chefs at five-star restaurants meticulously creating their masterpieces with expensive tools and ingredients, but none of them carried the same energy. There was a kind of magic in the way she moved, a rhythm, an ease, as though cooking was more than a job. It was her soul's language. He found himself, despite his usual impatience, sitting there longer than he'd intended. Perhaps it was the fact that the storm had trapped him at this cozy little restaurant, or maybe it was the soft, yet undeniable pull of curiosity that kept him rooted to the spot. It wasn't often that Nathaniel Westbrook was at a loss for words, but as he sat there, watching her, he realized he had no idea what to say. She approached him, breaking his reverie, a steaming bowl in hand. Her eyes briefly flicked to his, and for a moment, there was an almost unspoken challenge between them. "Try this," Lily said, her voice steady, but there was a hint of something daring in her words. He looked at the dish, simple, elegant in its presentation, nothing like the extravagant plates he was used to. A humble soup, its rich fragrance filling the room. There was no pretense here, no attempt to impress. And yet, Nathaniel could sense that there was something far deeper, more significant behind it than the expensive ingredients and techniques he was accustomed to. He hesitated for only a moment before taking a spoonful, the warm broth slipping smoothly over his tongue. The taste was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The flavors were rich, layered, with a balance that sent a surprising shiver down his spine. It wasn't just food, it was an experience, a memory, perhaps, a moment of comfort, like returning to something he had forgotten. Lily watched him closely, her gaze measuring. "So?" she asked, her tone casual, though her eyes betrayed her curiosity. For a long moment, Nathaniel didn't speak. His mind was processing the unexpected complexity of the dish. "It's impressive," he said, carefully setting the spoon down. He didn't want to admit it, but there was no denying the power of the flavors, the quiet mastery behind it. She raised an eyebrow. "Impressive? Is that all?" Her voice was playful, but Nathaniel sensed there was something deeper in the way she asked. She wasn't looking for praise. She was testing him, pushing him. He tilted his head, trying to match her unspoken challenge. "It's more than impressive," he said, his voice softer now, almost reluctant. "It's exceptional. I wasn't expecting this in a place like this." Lily's lips curved into a subtle smile, the hint of pride glimmering in her eyes. "That's the point," she replied. "You'd be surprised how many people underestimate what's in front of them." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, considering her words. There was something about her, something about this place that unsettled him. It wasn't just the food, or her skill as a chef. It was the way she made him see things differently, the way she didn't cater to his usual expectations. In his world, people constantly tried to impress him, to fit into his mold. But Lily, she didn't care about that. The realization hit him harder than he expected. "You're not what I expected either," he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Lily's smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition of the shift between them. "And what did you expect?" she asked, her voice low, almost teasing. "I don't know," Nathaniel said, his mind still reeling. "I guess I thought people like you didn't exist in places like this. I thought everything here would be small, insignificant." Lily's eyes softened for a moment, and for the first time, Nathaniel saw a different side of her, a vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. She wasn't just a chef. She wasn't just the owner of a small restaurant. She was a woman with a dream, with passion, and with a quiet strength that resonated far beyond the walls of this restaurant. "It's easy to think that," she said softly, "to look at a place like Willow Creek and think it's too small to matter. But sometimes, the most important things are the ones that don't shout the loudest." Nathaniel met her gaze, something shifting in the air between them. For the first time since he arrived, he didn't feel the need to be in control. He didn't feel the need to judge or critique. In that moment, surrounded by the storm and the quiet hum of the restaurant, he simply listened. Lily returned to her work, but Nathaniel couldn't help but watch her. There was something magnetic about her, something that drew him in, despite himself. And as the storm continued outside, he realized that perhaps this was more than just a pit stop at his business trip. Perhaps it was the start of something far more unpredictable. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't such a bad place after all. Chapter 4. Secrets in the storm. Wind howled louder outside, rattling the windows, but inside the Savory Spoon, the storm felt like a distant memory. The warmth of the restaurant enveloped Nathaniel, the rich scent of simmering dishes filling the air. He sat at his table, the faint hum of conversation from the few other patrons in the room mixing with the clinking of silverware. Yet, despite the comfort surrounding him, a part of him couldn't shake the sense of unease, as if someone was about to shift the course of his life in a direction he wasn't ready for. Lily had begun to open up to him more over the past few hours, the initial coolness she'd shown beginning to melt away, though her guardedness remained. There were glimpses of the woman beneath the tough exterior, the part of her that wasn't just a chef, but a person with her own story, her own past. She'd shared her dreams of expanding her restaurant one day, creating a space that celebrated local ingredients and connected with the people of Willow Creek on a deeper level. But there was something more, something she wasn't saying, something that felt just out of reach. Lily returned to his table, a fresh dish in hand. It was an unassuming plate, but there was something about the way it was presented, the subtle elegance that made Nathaniel pause. He glanced up at her, but she was already turning away, her focus shifting back to the kitchen. "You never told me why you're here," she said quietly as she made her way back to the counter. Her words were not an invitation for conversation, but Nathaniel sensed a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Nathaniel set down his fork, a sudden weight settling in his chest. She was right, he hadn't shared much of himself since arriving. The truth was, he hadn't been ready to let anyone in, especially someone like Lily. She had a way of making him think differently, and for a man who had spent his life keeping his emotions in check, it was unsettling. "I'm here for business," Nathaniel said, keeping his tone neutral, scoping out the town for a possible new venture. "But, as you've probably noticed, I'm not exactly in my element here." Lily raised an eyebrow, a knowing look crossing her face. "You think this place is too small for someone like you?" Nathaniel didn't reply immediately. The question had caught him off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because it was so blunt. Most people were too afraid to ask him anything personal, much less challenge him on his own perceptions. "I thought so," he finally said, his voice quieter than before. "But I'm starting to see that there's more to it than meets the eye." Lily's gaze softened, just for a moment. "There's always more," she said, almost to herself. Then she turned, her attention once again focused on the bustling kitchen. Nathaniel watched her for a moment, sensing there was something she wasn't saying. He could feel it, an undercurrent beneath her words, a shadow in her eyes that suggested there was more to her than the tough chef who had built the Savory Spoon from the ground up. He decided to press further. "You know," he began, his tone casual, though his mind was already turning, "I've been wondering, how did you end up in Willow Creek? It's not exactly the place someone like you would choose to settle." Lily didn't turn around, but Nathaniel saw her hands stiffen for a moment before she slowly set down the knife she'd been holding. Her voice was quieter when she spoke next, almost distant. "My family owned a restaurant here once," she said, the words carrying a weight that made Nathaniel pause. "Before I took over the Savory Spoon, we ran a place called the Creekside Grill. It was a good spot, popular with the locals. My father put everything into it, but he lost it." Her voice faltered for a second, then she straightened, her hands gripping the counter as if steadying herself. "It wasn't just the business that got lost. It was the dream, the hope he had for something bigger. I watched him fight until the end, but it wasn't enough. The competition was too strong." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. He could hear the pain in her voice, the underlying bitterness she was trying to mask. There was a history here, a story that hadn't been told, and it made him realize just how much he didn't know about this town or about her. He set his fork down, his mind racing. Competition. The word echoed in his mind. A key to a door he wasn't sure he was ready to open. There was something there, something that connected her past to his. Something he hadn't yet put together. Who was your competition? He asked, his voice quieter than before, careful not to push too hard. Lily's gaze shifted toward him then, and for the first time, there was a flash of something more than guardedness. A flicker of vulnerability. His name was James Westbrook, she said, each word heavy with unspoken emotion. Nathaniel's father. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat, his hand, still resting on the table, clenched into a fist. He hadn't expected that name to come up. Not here. Not like this. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. His father, the same man he had spent years trying to please. The man who had built the Westbrook empire, was tied to our family's downfall. The weight of the revelation settled over him like a fog, and for a moment, Nathaniel wasn't sure what to say. Lily continued, her voice steady, but filled with unspoken pain. Your father bought out my family's business years ago, Nathaniel. He drove us out of the market. And then the Creekside Grill shut down. I don't know if he ever realized what it cost my family. But it doesn't matter now. What's done is done. Nathaniel was silent for a long time. His mind was spinning, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and guilt. He hadn't known the full extent of his father's dealings, the cold, calculating decisions that had torn apart families for the sake of business. I didn't know, he finally said, his voice tight. I swear to you, I didn't know it went that far. Lily didn't respond right away, her back still to him. She continued preparing the next dish. But her voice, when it came, was quieter, almost resigned. You don't have to apologize. It's not your fault. Her words were tinged with a bitterness he hadn't expected. But there was no malice in them. It was as if she had long accepted the injustice, had built a wall around it that Nathaniel was only now beginning to see. The storm outside continued to rage, but in that small restaurant, amidst the echoes of old wounds and untold stories, Nathaniel realized that the Savory Spoon was more than just a place. It was a reminder of what had been lost. And now, standing at the edge of something new, he wasn't sure how much of the past could ever be repaired. But one thing was certain. He would find a way to make it right. Chapter 5. The calm before the storm outside had finally started to subside, though the thick, heavy clouds still hung low in the sky, casting the town of Willow Creek in a muted, dusky light. Nathaniel sat by the window, watching the last of the rain trickle down the glass, each droplet a small reminder of the unpredictable nature of life itself. He had hoped to be gone long before the storm had cleared. But here he was, still sitting in the Savory Spoon, feeling more tethered to this place than he ever expected. Lily had retreated into the kitchen to their tense conversation about her family, her movements still precise and purposeful, but now there was an air of finality to it. She had been distant, almost as though she had given him enough of her story to leave it at that. She was an open book, but only to a point. For every layer she revealed, she carefully added another one to keep him at arm's length. Nathaniel wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to being left with questions, with no clear answers in sight. In his world, everything had always been carefully orchestrated, neatly packaged. But here, in Willow Creek, in this small restaurant, the rules were different. Life was messy. People were messy. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure how to navigate the chaos. The sound of footsteps approaching broke him from his thoughts. Lily appeared at his side, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, her expression still guarded, but softer than it had been earlier. She placed the cup on the table in front of him with a quiet grace, the steam curling in the air like an offering. Here, she said, her voice low but not unkind. You look like you need it. Nathaniel's eyes flicked to the cup, then back up to her. Thanks, he said, his voice tinged with a touch of uncertainty. He didn't know why he felt the need to thank her, perhaps because, despite the tension between them, there was something oddly comforting about her presence. You should get some rest, Lily added, her gaze flicking briefly to the clock on the wall. "The roads will be clear by morning." Nathaniel shook his head slightly, not looking away from her. "I can't leave yet," he said, his voice more firm than he intended. "There's something here, something I'm not done with yet." Lily didn't respond immediately, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing his words. "Finally," she nodded, stepping back as if sensing he needed space. But there was an odd softness to her movements, something that wasn't entirely about business or politeness. She was giving him a choice, a rare one in his life. Nathaniel found himself taken aback by it, unsure how to interpret her gesture. "You're not the first person to come here thinking they could change everything in an afternoon," she said after a moment, her voice quiet, but laced with something he couldn't quite place. "Willow Creek has a way of pulling people in, but don't get too comfortable, Nathaniel. Not everything is what it seems." The warning was subtle yet undeniable. But before he could respond, Lily was already walking away, returning to the kitchen. Nathaniel sat there for a moment, staring into his coffee, the steam rising in a lazy swirl. He hadn't realized how much he needed someone to say that, to tell him that this wasn't a place where he could just come in, make a deal, and leave. A part of him, the part that had driven him to succeed at all costs, wanted to push back. He wanted to remind her that he could do whatever he set his mind to. But another part of him, the part that had been quietly unraveling since the moment he stepped into the savory spoon, knew she was right. He couldn't just waltz into Willow Creek, the way he had done with every other town, and expect it to bend to his will. Lily, for all her fierce independence, had given him something he hadn't anticipated, a glimpse of a life not defined by profit and power, a life built on something more intangible, something deeper. That realization unsettled him more than he cared to admit. As the evening wore on, the restaurant quieted, the last few patrons filtering out, the night stretched on. Nathaniel remained at his table, his coffee long forgotten, his thoughts turned inward, swirling with the weight of everything he'd learned about Lily and her past, and about the truths that had been hidden from him, truths he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He stood up, the sound of his chair scraping against the floor breaking the stillness of the room. He walked over to the counter, where Lily was wiping down the surface, her back to him. "I should probably head out soon," he said, his voice almost a whisper in the quiet room. Lily turned to face him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, neither one willing to break the silence first. Then, slowly, she nodded, her eyes flicking to the door as if she were already considering the reality of him leaving. "You can stay the night if you want," she said, the words a little more tentative than before. "I'm not kicking you out, but I think it's time for both of us to figure out what we want." Nathaniel paused. He didn't know what he had expected, but her words caught him off guard. There was no anger, no bitterness, just the quiet resignation of someone who had been through too much to get attached to fleeting things. "I'm not here to take over your life, Lily," Nathaniel said, the sincerity in his voice surprising even him. "I didn't come here to disrupt everything, but I can't walk away without knowing if there's something worth fighting for." Lily's gaze softened, just a fraction. She didn't respond immediately, but her silence spoke volumes. He wasn't sure where this would lead, he wasn't sure where he would lead, for that matter, but for the first time in days, he felt like maybe he didn't need to have all the answers right away. The storm outside may have cleared, but in the savory spoon, there was still something brewing, something neither of them was ready to face yet. Unwanted attention. Nathaniel couldn't help but think about the strange tranquility that had settled over Willow Creek after the storm. The air felt fresher, the kind of stillness that followed after something significant had passed. Yet, despite the peaceful facade of the town, there was a sense of unease gnawing at him. Every corner he turned, every street he walked down, it felt like the storm's echoes were still reverberating, and the calm he'd come to appreciate was far from true. As the days passed, Nathaniel found himself strangely tethered to Willow Creek. He'd intended to leave as soon as the roads cleared, but each time he thought about his exit, someone kept him rooted to this place. Lily, her voice echoed in his mind, Her words both a warning and an invitation. He hadn't expected to feel so unsettled, so uncertain. This town, this woman, had cracked open something inside him he hadn't even realized existed. And then there was the constant buzz of rumors that wouldn't stop, spreading through the town like wildfire. The whispers had started to reach his ears. Nathaniel had been in Willow Creek long enough now to hear the stories. There were those who didn't trust him, who didn't like the idea of a big city billionaire stomping through their small town, trying to sink his claws into their traditions. He had heard the murmurs about his supposed plans to take over the local food scene. But what caught him off guard was how quickly the town had come to view him through the lens of his family's reputation specifically. The shadow of his father's ruthlessness, which still loomed over every deal Nathaniel made, as he walked into the Savory Spoon one afternoon. He overheard the conversation before he even entered. It wasn't just the townsfolk gossiping, it was a group of regulars, their voices hushed as if trying to keep their opinions from him. They didn't know he was standing outside the door, but he heard every word. "He's here to take over, you know," a voice murmured. "I've seen it before. The way they do things in the city. He's probably sizing the place up." Another voice, a woman's this time, replied more softly, "I hear he's thinking of opening up a high-end restaurant here. Can you imagine? This town doesn't need that kind of competition. It'll ruin everything. We've got Lily's place, and that's enough." Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, he considered walking away. But something about their conversation stuck in his chest. The words competition and ruin stung more than he expected. He entered the restaurant with a calm that didn't match the tightness in his chest, forcing himself to appear unaffected as he greeted Lily behind the counter. She looked up from the task at hand, offering him a polite but neutral smile. "Back again so soon. You really are determined to try every dish I've got," she teased, the lightness in her voice almost masking the tension that had settled between them. Nathaniel returned a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm just trying to figure out why people are talking about me behind my back," he said coolly, his words more pointed than he intended. Lily's smile faltered, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. She set down the knife she was holding and wiped her hands on a towel before glancing at him, her gaze steady. "People talk," she said simply. "Small towns have a way of doing that. It's not unusual for people to be wary of newcomers, especially when they don't know your intentions." Nathaniel studied her, his lips pressing into a thin line. Her response was measured, neutral, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with him. Was she trying to protect him, or was she just brushing him off? "Are you trying to tell me I should just let the rumors run wild?" he asked, his voice quieter now, the weight of his frustration creeping through. Lily's eyes softened, though the walls between them still held firm. "I'm not trying to tell you anything. I'm just saying, don't let it get to you." She paused for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "People have their own reasons for feeling the way they do. But if you're serious about staying here, about being a part of this town, you're going to have to prove yourself." Nathaniel clenched his jaw, the words she'd just spoken hitting harder than he expected. Prove himself. He wasn't used to having to prove anything, least of all to small-town folk who didn't understand his world. But something about her, about the way she said it, made him realize she wasn't just talking about his business. She was talking about him. "How?" he asked, his voice low, almost vulnerable in a way that surprised him. Lily didn't immediately respond, but instead, she moved toward the kitchen, her movements calm and deliberate. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost like a confession. "By showing that you're not here to change everything, Nathaniel. You don't have to fight for something here. Just let it be. Let the town be what it is." Her words lingered between them, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Nathaniel didn't know if it was an invitation, a challenge, or a warning, but the more he thought about it, the more it unsettled him. The door swung open, and the man entered, causing Lily to turn her attention to him. Nathaniel didn't recognize him at first, but then he saw the way the man smiled at Lily, warm, familiar. The kind of smile that came with years of history. The kind of smile that Nathaniel had never received. Not from her. At least. The man nodded at Nathaniel briefly, then approached the counter. He and Lily exchanged a few words. Casual. Easy. Nathaniel couldn't help but notice the way they interacted. The ease in their connection. It was familiar, comfortable. The kind of bond that Nathaniel had never had with anyone in his life. It wasn't just the town. It wasn't just the people. It was Lily. And just like that, a thought began to form in the back of his mind, a thought that he wasn't entirely sure he was ready to confront. Lily didn't belong to him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he was still here. Still trying to figure out what it all meant. And the unwanted attention, the rumors, they were just the beginning. Chapter 7. The delf quiet hum of the savory spoon had become oddly comforting to Nathaniel. He found himself spending more time in the small restaurant than he'd intended, lingering over cups of coffee and listening to the familiar sound of Lily's culinary dance in the kitchen. Despite the storm of gossips whirling around him, he was starting to appreciate this slower pace, the simple rhythm of the town. But the harsh reality of his business dealings was never far from his mind, and he knew it was time to face the tension between him and Lily head-on. The rumors had continued to spread, the whispers louder each day. Nathaniel could feel the walls closing in. People had started to avoid him, casting wary glances whenever he entered the room. He knew they didn't trust him, and honestly, he couldn't blame them. He had come here to explore a business venture, but now he realized that his presence in Willow Creek had become more than just a business opportunity. It was a symbol of everything they feared. He had come to offer solutions, but instead, he found himself as much a part of the problem. That's why, as much as he hated to admit it, he needed to make a choice. He couldn't keep hiding behind his plans. He needed to either leave Willow Creek or make a real offer. A real attempt to be part of this town's future, not just as an outsider, but as someone who respected what it was and who had fought to keep it that way. Nathaniel had already mapped out the basics of his proposal. He had done his research. He knew the market. He knew the people. And he knew what Willow Creek was missing. But there was one thing he hadn't fully accounted for. Lily. That morning, after a sleepless night spent weighing his options, Nathaniel decided it was time to confront the one person who could make or break his plan. He stood outside the Savory Spoon, looking up at the modest, charming exterior. The restaurant was quiet for the moment, the late morning lull that came before the lunch rush. Taking a deep breath, Nathaniel walked inside. Lily was behind the counter, as usual, preparing ingredients. Her back was turned, but when she heard the door chime, she straightened up and turned toward him. She didn't smile, but she didn't scowl either. The neutrality in her expression made it difficult for Nathaniel to gauge her mood. "What can I do for you, Nathaniel?" she asked, her voice cool, professional, yet laced with something else. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was something else he couldn't quite put his finger on. "I need to talk to you," Nathaniel said, his voice steady, but the weight of the conversation was already hanging in the air. He didn't need to waste time with pleasantries. Lily paused, looking at him for a moment. She hesitated, as if deciding whether or not to dismiss him outright. But then, she nodded and gestured to the small table by the window. "Sit. I'll bring you something." Nathaniel followed her to the table, his mind racing as he sat down. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. Lily returned quickly, setting down a glass of water before taking a seat across from him, her hands folded neatly on the table. "What is it?" she asked, her voice guarded. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm the nerves that were starting to prick at the edges of his resolve. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Lily," he began, his voice quiet but firm. "But I'm also not here to tiptoe around it. I've been hearing the rumors, and I know you've heard them too. You think I'm here to take over, to change everything, to turn the Savory Spoon into something it's not. And maybe that's part of it, but it's not the whole story." Lily didn't respond, her gaze steady, though there was a slight tightening of her jaw as if she was bracing for something. Nathaniel continued, unwilling to back down now, I've spent years building my empire. I know what it takes to succeed. But I've also learned that success isn't just about the bottom line, he said, his voice rough with the weight of his own self-awareness. It's about understanding the people you're working with. And what I've learned here, in Willow Creek, is that you don't just walk into a town like this and start making decisions without understanding the people who built it in the first place. I've made mistakes. Lily's eyes softened for just a moment, though she remained silent, giving him the space to continue. I've been thinking about how to approach this, Nathaniel continued, and I realized that there's a way forward that respects what you've built here, what the savory spoons to this town. He took a deep breath, watching her closely, the words heavy in the air between them. I want to buy your restaurant, he said, his voice steady, but not to take it over, not to turn it into something I control. I want to invest in it. I want to help you expand it together. I know you have dreams, bigger than this little place, and I want to help you make them real. Lily's expression remained unreadable as she studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't react immediately, and Nathaniel felt the tension building, the weight of her silence almost unbearable. He had expected resistance, but this was different. She wasn't angry, at least, not outwardly, but he knew she was considering it. He could see it in the way her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. What exactly are you offering, Nathaniel? Lily asked after a moment, her voice calm but tinged with suspicion. What's the catch? What do you want from me in return? Nathaniel hesitated. There was no easy way to answer that. Nothing in return, he said, his voice firm now. I don't want to change what you've built. I don't want to dictate your menu or your staff. I want to help you grow it into something bigger, something that can stand against all the big chains coming in. You've built a foundation here that's built on trust and passion, and that's something I can't buy. But I can help support it. I can help make it stronger. Lily leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes flicking to the side as she considered his offer. Nathaniel held his breath, waiting for her response. I don't know, Nathaniel, she said, her voice quiet but filled with doubt. This town, it's more than just a place to me. It's my family's legacy, and I don't know if I can trust someone like you to protect that. Nathaniel felt a pang in his chest at her words, but he refused to back down. I'm not asking you to trust me with everything, he said softly, but I want to prove that I can be part of this town. I want to prove that I'm not here to take away what you've worked so hard for. I'm here to help you build something that lasts. A perfect love story, if you will, between tradition and progress. Lily didn't reply right away. Her gaze remained fixed on him, unreadable. For a long moment, the silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of unspoken words. Then, finally, she spoke. I'll think about it, she said quietly, her eyes softening just a fraction. But don't mistake that for an agreement. Nathaniel nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing, though he knew the road ahead would be far from easy. But at least now, there was a chance for something real, a chance to prove that his vision could align with hers, and that the future of the savory spoon could be a perfect love story between the two. Chapter 8. A bitter truth. Days following Nathaniel's proposal had been quieter than expected. He had thought that Lily's answer would come quickly, either a flat rejection or tentative acceptance, but instead, she had remained distant, almost as if processing everything in silence. He respected her need for space, but it didn't stop the unease that twisted in his gut whenever he walked into the savory spoon. He was at the restaurant more frequently now, sitting in the corner, barely making himself known. Most of the time, Lily was preoccupied with the lunch rush, her movements quick, but always with that same quiet confidence he had come to admire. Despite the tension between them, there was something comforting in the rhythm of her work, something about the way she owned her space, the way she created beauty with every dish, made Nathaniel feel if he had stumbled into something sacred. But all that changed the day he overheard the conversation between Lily and the local businessman. He had been seated at the back of the restaurant, absent-mindedly stirring his coffee, when the voices reached his ears. Are you sure about this? The man asked, his tone low but insistent. Lily's voice came next, sharp, but laced with frustration. "I've been sure for years. I'm not going to sit here and let him." She cut herself off, her voice lowering, though Nathaniel could still make out the words. He leaned forward, catching every syllable. "Let him what?" The man pressed. "Let him erase everything my father built," she said, the bitterness in her words cutting through the quiet space between them. "It's all we have left, and I won't just hand it over to someone who thinks he can come in and throw money at it like it's nothing." Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat, the truth of her words crashing down on him like a wave. It wasn't just the business she was holding on to, it was her family's legacy, her father's dream, her memories. Her voice was a little steadier when she spoke again. "I thought I could handle this on my own, but I don't know anymore. This town is changing, and I don't know if I can keep up." The man's voice softened, but Nathaniel could hear the tension that still simmered beneath the surface. "You've been through a lot, Lily. You can't do this alone. Let someone help. Let Nathaniel help." Nathaniel felt a sickening weight settle in his stomach. She had already been fighting a losing battle for so long, and here he was, the man who had unknowingly made it worse, the man who had tried to offer help, but had only made things more complicated. The conversation had ended shortly after that, and Lily had returned to the kitchen, her movements a little more hurried than before. Nathaniel sat back in his chair, his mind racing with everything he had just learned. He had come here thinking he was offering a solution, a partnership that would help them both move forward. But what he hadn't understood, what he had completely overlooked, was the weight of the past. Lily wasn't just protecting the savory spoon, she was protecting her family's history. She was fighting for the very thing that had been torn from her father, for the piece of him that had never really let go. And Nathaniel, with his business-savvy approach, had only come in as a reminder of everything that had been lost. The guilt gnawed at him. He sat there, the taste of betrayal bitter on his tongue. He had come to Willow Creek believing he could help, but now it felt like everything he touched turned to dust. When Lily emerged from the kitchen, she was wiping her hands on a towel, her face set in its usual mask of composure. But there was something different in her eyes, a flicker of the storm she had kept hidden. Nathaniel stood up slowly, not sure what to say. She didn't meet his gaze immediately, but he could feel the tension between them as she approached. "I heard you talking," he said quietly, his voice low, filled with a guilt he couldn't hide. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard everything." Lily didn't flinch, though the way her shoulders stiffened told him that she was far from unaffected. She didn't say anything for a long moment, her eyes avoiding his, but then she spoke, her voice soft and steady. "I didn't want you to know," she said, almost as if the words themselves pained her. "I didn't want you to know how much this place means to me, how much it means to my father. It's not just about a business deal, it's about my family, my history, and you. You've come in offering something I'm not sure I can accept." Nathaniel felt his throat tighten, the weight of her words sinking deep. He took a step toward her, but she held up her hand, stopping him in his tracks. "I've fought so hard, Nathaniel," she continued, her voice breaking slightly, "and I've failed. I can't lose this, not like my father did. I won't. This restaurant is everything I have left of him, and I won't just hand it over to someone who can't see that." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He thought he understood her, but he hadn't truly seen her, hadn't realized how much pain she carried beneath that tough exterior. He had come here thinking he was the one offering something, but in reality, it was Lily who had been offering him the chance to truly understand. "I never meant to hurt you, Lily," Nathaniel said, his voice hoarse. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I was wrong. I didn't understand what this meant to you, to your family." She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the counter in front of her, but Nathaniel could see the way her jaw tightened, the silent tears she was holding back. "I just want you to know that I'm sorry," he said, his words filled with regret. "I don't want to take anything from you. I just wanted to help." There was a long silence between them, and Nathaniel could feel the weight of everything that had passed, everything that had gone unsaid. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about understanding, about respect, and about seeing each other for who they really were. Lily looked up at him finally, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," she said softly, "but thank you for finally listening." Nathaniel nodded, knowing that words couldn't fix everything, but maybe, just maybe, they were a start. Chapter 9. The unexpected confession. Days that followed were heavy, like the stillness before a storm that never fully broke. Nathaniel could feel the unspoken distance between him and Lily, a divide that seemed wider now, as if the foundation of their tentative connection had shifted beneath them. There were no easy words, no quick fixes, only time that neither of them seemed ready to give. Nathaniel had left Willow Creek for a few days to give Lily the space she needed. He had retreated to his luxury apartment in the city, where everything was meticulously ordered, where he could escape the chaos of his emotions and the complexities of his new reality. But as he sat in the silence of his sleek, polished space, he couldn't shake the image of Lily's face when she had told him about her father, about the dream he had fought for, and the legacy she was now desperately trying to protect. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected her to carry such a heavy burden, and he hadn't expected to feel so powerless in the face of it. But despite everything, he knew one thing: he couldn't walk away from this, not from Willow Creek, not from Lily. So, after a few days of reflecting, Nathaniel made the decision to return. The storm within him had calmed, but the storm in the town was far from over. It wasn't just about the savory spoon anymore. It was about what it meant to both of them, what it meant for him to show up, to prove that he was more than his family's shadow, more than just the businessman who could sweep in and take control. He had to show her that he understood now, that he saw her, truly saw her, beyond the walls she had so carefully built. When he arrived back in Willow Creek, the skies were clear, the air crisp. There was a kind of peacefulness to the town now, almost as though I was waiting for something to change. Lily was at the restaurant when he walked in. The familiar warmth of the place immediately enveloped him. She looked up from the counter as he entered, her expression unreadable, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, uncomfortable, yet there was something else there, a quiet anticipation, like two people standing on the edge of something neither of them knew how to navigate. Nathaniel stepped toward her, and she didn't retreat. She simply waited, her eyes locking with his, as if trying to read the intent behind his every move. "I've been thinking a lot," Nathaniel began, his voice low, almost hesitant, "about everything you said, about your family, your father, the savory spoon. I see now that I didn't understand it before. I didn't understand how much this place meant to you." Lily's lips tightened into a thin line, but she didn't interrupt. She simply watched him, waiting. "I want to tell you something," Nathaniel continued, his heart pounding in his chest. "Something I've never told anyone." Her brow furrowed, and she looked at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. "What are you talking about?" Nathaniel took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. This wasn't easy, but for once, he didn't want to hide behind his carefully crafted persona. For once, he wanted to be vulnerable with her, just to be real. "My father," Nathaniel began, his voice thick with the weight of the words. "He was ruthless. He didn't care who he hurt, who he trampled over. I've spent most of my life trying to live up to his legacy, trying to prove that I could be better than him. But I'm starting to see that everything I've done, every deal I've made, every restaurant I've built was for the wrong reasons. It wasn't about the food, the people, or the passion. It was about power. It was about control." Lily's eyes softened, a flicker of something crossing her face, but she remained silent, giving him space to speak. "I know now that I've been chasing something hollow," Nathaniel continued, the weight of his confession settling in the air between them. "I thought I was doing what I had to do to prove my worth, but the truth is, I've been running from the man I really am, the man I don't want to be, and I don't want to be that man anymore." Lily's gaze never wavered, but she seemed to be absorbing his words carefully, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing. Nathaniel took another step toward her, his voice quiet, but filled with conviction. "I don't want to take this restaurant from you, Lily. I don't want to take anything from you. I want to help you build it, help you make it into something even greater, something that will stand on its own. Not because of what my family can offer, but because of what you have built here. You've done something incredible." And he stopped himself, realizing how much he was saying, how much of himself he was laying bare. But for once, it felt like the right thing to do. "I want to be part of that," he said simply. "I want to help, not as a businessman, but as someone who truly believes in what you're doing here." There was a long silence between them, and Nathaniel's heart raced. He hadn't planned on saying all of this, but now that the words were out, there was no taking them back. Finally, Lily spoke, her voice quieter than before. "Nathaniel, this is more than just a business deal to me. This is everything. My father's dream, my family's legacy, it's all tied to this place. I've fought so hard to keep it alive, to keep it from becoming another corporate chain. I can't just hand it over to you, no matter how much you offer." Nathaniel nodded, his throat tight. "I know. I don't expect you to just hand it over. I never did. But I do want to help, if you'll let me." Lily's gaze softened, her walls faltering just slightly. "I'm not sure what that means, Nathaniel. I'm not sure if I can trust you with everything, but I'll admit there's something in what you said that makes me believe you're not just trying to fix your father's mistakes. And maybe that's enough to start." Nathaniel's heart leapt in his chest. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. "I'll prove it to you," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. One step at a time. Lily nodded slowly, her eyes meeting his, filled with a mixture of skepticism and hope. "We'll see," she said softly. "But this can't be just about business. It has to be about something real." Nathaniel smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I know, and I'm willing to show you that. I'll make sure it's real." For the first time since he arrived in Willow Creek, Nathaniel felt as if he was standing on solid ground. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was a start, and sometimes that was all you needed. Chapter 11. Old flames and new bonds. The days in Willow Creek grew longer, the summer heat stretching across the town like a lazy haze. Nathaniel had settled into a rhythm, a quiet routine that involved more time at the savory spoon than he had anticipated. He had continued to keep his distance from Lily, giving her space to process the tentative progress they had made. But the space between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was a new kind of quiet, one filled with the promise of what might come. Lily's hesitance remained, but there was a softening to her attitude, a slow thawing that Nathaniel couldn't help but notice. They had begun talking more, not just about the restaurant, but about their lives outside of business. She'd shared a few anecdotes about her father, about her childhood, and Nathaniel had responded in kind, telling her stories from his own life though. Of course, he kept the darker parts, the parts that still haunted him, locked away, but there was something else in the air, something that neither of them had anticipated. It was a Saturday afternoon when the door to the Savory Spoon swung open with its usual jingle, signaling the arrival of a new customer. Nathaniel, seated at his usual corner table with a cup of coffee in hand, looked up only to freeze in place. A man had entered the restaurant, tall and broad-shouldered, his confident stride immediately catching Nathaniel's attention. There was something familiar about him, a sense of recognition that hit Nathaniel like a wave. The man scanned the room briefly before his eyes landed on Lily, who was behind the counter. The instant their gazes met, something passed between them, something unspoken, a subtle connection that made Nathaniel feel like an intruder in his own thoughts. Lily's face faltered for a moment. She visibly tensed, her eyes narrowing slightly. Her usual warmth seemed to disappear, replaced by a coolness Nathaniel hadn't seen before. The man walked toward the counter with a familiar, easy smile. Nathaniel watched the exchange closely. There was an ease between them, a connection that Nathaniel couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the friendly, casual familiarity of old acquaintances, it was something deeper, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Lily," the man said, his voice deep and warm. "It's been a while." Lily managed a tight smile, but it was evident that there was something strained in her expression. "Mark," she said, her tone cool but controlled, "what brings you back to Willow Creek?" Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat at the name, Mark. The name resonated in the air, and for the first time since he'd come to town, something inside him tightened with jealousy, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Lily seemed to stiffen at Mark's approach, and Nathaniel couldn't help but feel like an outsider in the moment. He hadn't expected anyone from her past to come here, especially not someone who had the ability to bring this kind of tension to the room. Mark smiled again, though there was something in the way his eyes lingered on Lily that Nathaniel didn't like. "I heard you were back in town. Figured I'd stop by, see how you've been," Mark said, his voice casual, but Nathaniel could see the intent behind it. It wasn't just a friendly visit. There was something more, something that wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Lily's expression softened for a fraction of a second, but then she quickly masked it, her guard going back up. "I'm doing fine," she said, wiping her hands on her apron as if to prepare herself for whatever Mark would throw her way. Mark glanced over at Nathaniel, who had been silently observing the interaction. The realization hit him then. Mark was looking at him, sizing him up, no doubt aware of the subtle tension in the room. "And who's this?" Mark asked, his tone polite, but there was an undercurrent of something else in his voice, something that felt like a challenge. Lily looked over at Nathaniel, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Before she spoke, "This is Nathaniel. He's been helping out around here," she said, her voice steady but distant. Nathaniel stood slowly, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "Nathaniel Westbrook," he said, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you." Mark didn't immediately shake his hand. Instead, he gave Nathaniel a long, scrutinizing look before offering a tight smile. "Mark." His voice was cold, but polite, and Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the dynamic between Lily and Mark than he had expected. Lily cleared her throat, her eyes darting between the two men as if trying to diffuse whatever tension had suddenly grown thick in the air. "Mark and I go way back," she explained, her tone neutral. "We used to." She hesitated, and Nathaniel noticed her jaw clench ever so slightly. "We were together for a while." The words hit Nathaniel like a punch to the gut, even though he hadn't realized how much they would affect him. She'd been with Mark, the man standing in front of him. The familiarity between them, the way Mark looked at Lily, it was obvious that there was more than just friendship there. Mark's eyes flickered back to Nathaniel, a slight smirk tugging at his lips. "It's been a while since I've seen you around, Lily," he said, his voice dipping into a more familiar tone. "I was hoping we could catch up." Lily stiffened, and Nathaniel could see the subtle conflict in her eyes. There was something about Mark that made her uneasy, something she hadn't said, something she hadn't shared. Nathaniel couldn't put his finger on it, but it was there, like an undercurrent pulling at the edge of her emotions. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Lily said, her voice steady, but her eyes avoiding Mark's gaze. Mark's smirk faded, and for a moment, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Nathaniel could feel the unspoken tension between them, and he knew that this wasn't just a casual encounter. There was history here, history that had clearly left an impact on both of them. Mark turned to Nathaniel, finally acknowledging him properly. "You've been helping out here?" he asked, his tone more guarded now, but there was still an underlying sense of competition in his words. Nathaniel nodded, his hand still hanging at his side as he tried to gauge Mark's intentions. "That's right. Lily and I have been working on making this place better. We're just trying to figure out what the next step is." Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly sizing Nathaniel up. "I see," he said, the words laced with a subtle mockery. "Well, I'm sure Lily doesn't need any help. She's more than capable of handling things on her own." Lily's expression tightened at Mark's words, but she quickly masked it with a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate the offer, Mark, but I've got everything under control." Mark's gaze lingered on her a moment longer before he finally nodded, though there was something in his eyes that Nathaniel couldn't ignore, something that suggested he wasn't ready to back down, that he hadn't given up on winning Lily back. As Mark turned to leave, Nathaniel felt a pang of jealousy twist inside him. He didn't want to feel this way, didn't want to let his emotions get the best of him. But seeing the way Lily interacted with him, seeing the history between them, it stirred something deep inside him. When Mark was gone, the air in the restaurant felt different. Lily stood in silence for a moment before turning to Nathaniel. "You didn't have to see that," she said quietly, her voice tinged with an emotion Nathaniel couldn't place. "I didn't know," Nathaniel said, his voice soft. "But I'm here. If you want to talk about it, I'm here." Lily looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "It's complicated," she said. "It's not something I want to talk about right now." Nathaniel nodded, understanding. He could see the walls coming back up, the protective armor she wore around her heart. But despite the tension, despite the lingering doubts, he knew that this wasn't over. He had a chance, a small chance, to be the one who would stand by her. And that was enough to keep him here. For now, at least. Chapter 12. The heart of the storm winds had shifted again in Willow Creek. But this time, it wasn't the weather that was brewing a storm. The tension in the savory spoon was palpable, more intense than it had been in days. The morning rush was quieter than usual, the soft clinking of dishes and hushed conversation filling the air. But there was an undercurrent of unease running through the restaurant. Nathaniel could feel it, like a storm was waiting just behind the calm. He had seen Lily's tight-lipped smile, her distant eyes, as if something heavy had settled in her chest. And it wasn't just the return of Mark that had caused a change. Nathaniel had spent the past few weeks trying to build trust with her, to show her that he wasn't just here to take over or to push her into something she didn't want. But he knew he was walking a fine line. One misstep, and he could lose everything. The promise of the future seemed so fragile, like a delicate house of cards teetering on the edge. That morning, as Lily moved behind the counter with her usual grace, Nathaniel noticed her reaction when she glanced at the door. He had seen that look before, the flash of unease that came before someone's presence made itself known. And then he walked in. Mark. Again, Nathaniel's blood ran cold. It wasn't just the fact that Mark had come back to Willow Creek. It was the way he came in. He owned the place, his eyes scanning the room as if he belonged. Nathaniel could see it in the way Lily's posture stiffened, the way she briefly closed her eyes before forcing a smile. He knew what this meant. Mark hadn't just returned for a casual visit. He was here for something more, something he hadn't let go of. The tension between him and Lily was still there, thick and unspoken, lingering in the way their eyes met, in the way they both moved around each other, like two magnets with opposing forces. Nathaniel stood up slowly, his heart racing. He watched Mark approach the counter, a confident smirk tugging at his lips. The room seemed to shrink around them, the weight of the unspoken history between Lily and Mark filling every corner. Nathaniel felt the familiar tightness in his chest again, jealousy bubbling up in his throat, but he swallowed it down. Mark didn't acknowledge Nathaniel immediately. Instead, his gaze remained fixed on Lily as he slid into a seat at the bar. "Lily," he said, his voice casual but with an undertone of something more. "We need to talk." Lily's face remained carefully neutral, but Nathaniel could see the flicker of something in her eyes, a moment of vulnerability that she quickly concealed. She didn't respond right away, but finally nodded, her voice cool as she spoke. "About what, Mark?" Her tone was controlled, but there was a sharpness to it that wasn't there before. "I think we've said everything that needs to be said." Mark leaned forward, his expression softening just enough to show he wasn't giving up so easily. "I don't think so, not yet. You and I both know there's still a lot left unfinished between us. It's been too long, and I think we need closure. For both of us." Nathaniel could feel the tension building in the air, the unspoken words between them crackling like static electricity. He had to step in. He couldn't just sit back and let this continue. Lily was silent, her eyes focused on the counter, her fingers tapping nervously against the surface. Nathaniel's voice broke the silence, cutting through the thick air like a knife. "I think it's time for you to leave," Nathaniel said, his tone calm but firm. He stepped closer to Mark, his presence a shield between him and Lily. "You've said your piece, And it's clear Lily doesn't want to have this conversation. Mark's eyes narrowed at Nathaniel, the challenge evident in his gaze. He didn't stand, didn't back down. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, his smirk still in place. "I'm not leaving, Nathaniel," Mark said, his voice dripping with quiet mockery. "Not until Lily and I talk about things. And trust me, you don't want to get in the way of that. You don't know her like I do." Nathaniel's fists clenched at his sides, the tension in his body coiling tightly. He could feel the anger rising, the sense of possessiveness that had been simmering under the surface. But Lily's voice stopped him before he could say anything else. "I think it's time for both of you to stop," she said, her voice suddenly sharp and commanding. She turned to Mark, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of frustration and resolve. "You don't get to come back here and try to reopen old wounds, Mark. Not now. Not ever. We're done." Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what he had expected. But this wasn't it. Lily's words were clear. She wasn't going to let Mark walk all over her anymore. She wasn't going to let him dictate her past or her future. Mark's smirk faltered, his jaw tightening as Lily stood her ground. But he didn't leave. Instead, his voice lowered, a tone of quiet frustration slipping into his words. "You think it's that simple, don't you?" Mark's eyes flicked to Nathaniel, the challenge still present in his gaze. "You think you can just waltz in here and take over? Make yourself a part of something you don't understand? You're just another rich guy looking for something to buy." Nathaniel's pulse quickened, but he stayed silent, trying to gauge the situation. He couldn't let Mark provoke him, not in front of Lily. Lily's voice was low and firm as she responded. "This place isn't for sale, Mark. Not to you, not to anyone. And as for Nathaniel, he's here to help. You don't get to judge that." The room was silent for a moment, and Nathaniel could feel the storm swirling in the air, both between him and Mark, and more so between him and Lily. There was a crack in the calm that neither of them could ignore anymore. Mark stood up, his expression hardening as he glared at Nathaniel one last time. "This isn't over," he said, his words heavy with finality. "I'll be back. Lily, you'll see." Lily didn't respond, her gaze cold as she watched him leave. The door chimed as it closed behind him, and the silence that followed felt like a void. Nathaniel was still standing there, waiting, but Lily didn't look at him immediately. She just stood there, hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if bracing for the storm that had passed through. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you," she said, without looking at him. "I needed that. But it's not over." Nathaniel stepped closer, his heart still pounding. "I'm not going anywhere. Lily, I'm here, no matter what happens." She turned to face him then, her expression softening just a fraction. "I know, but this isn't just about you and me. It's about everything that came before, and it's not going to be easy." Nathaniel nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over him. "I know, but I'm here for the long haul, whether you believe that or not." Lily didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, her eyes tired but resolute. "We'll see." And for the first time, Nathaniel felt like the storm was finally starting to clear. Even if only for a moment, there was still a long way to go. But maybe, just maybe, they were starting to move forward. Chapter 13. The breaking point. Days after Mark's visit felt like a slow unraveling for Nathaniel. The calm that had settled over Willow Creek after the storm seemed to be nothing more than an illusion, a brief reprieve before the next wave of challenges hit. He had expected the tension between him and Lily to ease, but it only seemed to grow thicker. Despite her words that night, the walls she had put up between them remained, and Nathaniel found himself questioning everything he thought he understood about their fragile connection. Lily had been quieter, more distant, and each time Nathaniel tried to approach her, he could sense that the distance between them was growing. He had told her that he wasn't going anywhere, that he was in this for the long haul, but the more time he spent in Willow Creek, the more he realized that it wasn't just about proving himself to her, it was about proving something to himself. The pressure mounted as the grand opening of Nathaniel's new restaurant approached. The competition was fierce, and the stakes were high. He had promised Lily that he wouldn't impose his vision on her restaurant, that he wasn't here to take over. But the closer the opening came, the more it seemed like everything he had tried to avoid was pulling him in. He sat at his usual table at the Savory Spoon, watching the steady flow of customers pass through. The restaurant was buzzing with its usual energy, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. Nathaniel had made himself a part of the town's daily rhythm, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Lily had finally agreed to meet him after her shift. She had been avoiding him all week, keeping to herself more than usual, and Nathaniel knew he had to confront her if they were ever going to move forward. They needed to talk, to address what had happened with Mark, and to face the cracks that had started to form in their relationship. When she finally entered, her eyes didn't immediately meet his. She was carrying a bag of fresh produce from the market, her focus entirely on the task in front of her as she set the bag down on the counter. She was in the middle of her usual routine, but there was something in her posture that told Nathaniel she wasn't fully here. "Lily," Nathaniel said softly. Breaking the silence, she froze for just a moment, then sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know what you're going to say. No, you don't," Nathaniel replied, standing up slowly. "I need to say it, though." Lily turned to face him, her expression guarded. "I'm not ready to talk about everything, Nathaniel," she said, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "I don't even know where to begin." Nathaniel walked closer, his gaze softening. "I get it, but we can't just keep pretending like nothing's wrong. What happened with Mark? It's not just about him. It's about us, too. I can't keep dancing around it." Lily shook her head, the frustration in her eyes visible now. "It's not that simple. You don't understand what it's like to carry this place, to carry the weight of my father's legacy. I've been doing this on my own for so long, and now you're here, trying to help, but I don't know if I can let you in. I don't know if I can trust you with everything that I've built." Nathaniel's chest tightened at her words. He could feel the enormity of what she was carrying, the burden of her past and the pressure of the future. "I'm not trying to take over, Lily," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I'm here to help, but I need you to let me in. I need you to trust me. I can't do this without you." She took a step back, her eyes glinting with a mixture of anger and hurt. "You think it's that easy? You think you can just walk in here and fix everything? You're part of the reason this is so hard for me. You're just like everyone else who's come in and tried to change things. You're just like my father's business partners, like Mark, trying to take control of something that's not yours." Nathaniel's heart sank as she spoke, and he realized that everything she had feared about him, the doubts, the uncertainty, the history of being let down had come flooding back in that moment. "I'm not trying to control anything, Lily. I just want to be part of this. I want to help you build something, not take it from you." Lily's face softened for just a moment, but then she turned away, her voice quieter but still sharp. "I'm so tired of fighting, Nathaniel. I'm tired of this constant battle between holding on and letting go. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. And you just keep pushing. You don't even see it." "I see it," Nathaniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I see how much this means to you, how much you've sacrificed, but I don't want you to do it alone. You don't have to fight this battle by yourself. I'm here. I want to fight for you." The silence between them stretched on, the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Then, finally, Lily spoke again, her voice soft and trembling. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't keep letting you in only to have you leave. I can't keep holding on to something that's slipping through my fingers. I need space. I need to figure this out on my own." Nathaniel stood still, feeling the finality of her words pierce through him. He had known it was coming, this moment when the distance between them would become too much to bridge. But hearing her say it out loud hit him harder than he expected. "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice unwavering. "But I'll give you the space you need. I'll give you time. I'm not going anywhere, Lily, not until you're ready." She didn't respond, but her eyes told him everything he needed to know. There was pain there, a deep well of it, but there was something else, to a flicker of hope. It wasn't over. Not yet. Lily turned away from him, walking to the kitchen. But before she disappeared behind the counter, she looked back. I don't know what's going to happen, Nathaniel, but I need to do this my way. Nathaniel nodded, swallowing hard. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. The door closed softly behind her as she retreated to the back, and Nathaniel was left standing alone in the restaurant. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and for the first time in a long time, he wondered if he could hold on long enough to prove that what he was offering, what they were both trying to build, was worth fighting for. For now, though, all he could do was wait, and hope that when the storm passed, they would both be stronger for it. Chapter 14. The choicest days that followed the fight between Nathaniel and Lily were some of the hardest of his life. The tension was thick in the savory spoon. The distance between him and Lily undeniable. He gave her the space she asked for, respecting her need to work through her emotions on her own. But every time he walked into the restaurant, the silence that greeted him felt like a weight pressing down on him. He had come to Willow Creek to help, to build something alongside her. But it seemed like every time they made progress, the past came crashing back in. Lily's walls were high, and Nathaniel knew it would take more than just promises to bring them down. But what choice did he have? He couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when there was so much at stake. Not just for the savory spoon, but for the relationship they were trying to build. Days passed, and he found himself sitting at the corner table, watching Lily move through the motions of her day. She was quiet, more withdrawn than usual, and her eyes never seemed to meet his anymore. He had hoped that by stepping back, he would give her the time she needed. But now, he wasn't so sure it was enough. Lily's ex-boyfriend Mark hadn't returned, but Nathaniel could feel the shadow of his presence lingering in the air. Mark had been part of Lily's past, a part she hadn't fully let go of, and Nathaniel could feel the ghost of that relationship haunting their every interaction. Nathaniel knew that the time had come. He could keep waiting, keep hoping for a change, or he could make the choice to move forward whether Lily was ready or not. It was a Wednesday when Nathaniel finally made up his mind. He stood up from his usual seat at the savory spoon, the quiet buzz of conversation and the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air. Lily was behind the counter, her back to him. She prepared for the evening rush. He had watched her from afar for long enough. He walked toward her, the heavy weight of the decision weighing on his chest. She was focused on the task in front of her, her hands moving quickly as she sliced vegetables for the evening's specials. She didn't hear him approach, but when he stood next to her, she froze, her movement stalling for just a moment. Lily didn't look up immediately, but after a beat, she met his gaze. Her expression was unreadable, the walls still firmly in place, but there was something in her eyes, something soft, yet uncertain. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel began, his voice calm but steady, "and I think it's time we talk about what happens next." Lily didn't say anything at first, her eyes flicking to the side. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice guarded. Nathaniel took a deep breath. He had come to a realization over the past few days. He couldn't keep standing in the shadow of uncertainty. He had to make a choice. He couldn't continue waiting for Lily to make up her mind. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about what they both wanted, and the only way forward was to face it head on. "I think it's time I made a decision," he said quietly, his words heavy with meaning. "I've been here for a while, trying to show you I'm not like everyone else who's come and gone. I'm not trying to force anything on you, but I also can't keep waiting for you to make the choice for me. If this is going to work, if we're going to build something together, it has to start with trust, and I can't keep trying to prove myself if you're not ready to let me in." Lily's lips parted slightly, and for a brief moment, Nathaniel saw something flicker in her eyes, pain, hesitation. But there was also something else, something vulnerable, something raw. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I don't know if I can keep fighting for this. For you, for us. I've spent so long building the savory spoon, trying to make it everything my father wanted. But now it feels like I'm losing myself in the process. I'm scared, Nathaniel. Scared of losing what I've worked so hard for. and scared of letting you in, because I don't know what will happen if I do." Nathaniel stepped closer to her, his heart racing. "I'm not asking you to let go of your past, Lily. I'm asking you to trust me to be part of your future. I'm not here to change everything, and I'm not here to take this from you. I just want to help you build something that's yours, that's ours. But I can't do that if you're not willing to take a step with me." Lily met his gaze, her eyes searching his face for something. Maybe it was answers, or maybe it was reassurance. But Nathaniel knew that there was no perfect answer, no perfect solution. All he had was his word, and he had already shown her more than he ever thought he would. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now," Nathaniel continued. "I just want the chance to prove that we can build something together. But I need to know if you're willing to take that step, if you're ready to make a choice." The silence that followed hung in the air like a heavy fog. Lily's eyes searched his face, her expression still uncertain. But something had shifted. There was a flicker of understanding there, a sense that she was finally starting to see the possibility between them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lily spoke softly. "I don't know if I'm ready to make that choice, Nathaniel," she said, her voice low. "But I do know this. I can't keep living in fear of what might happen. Maybe it's time I stop holding on so tight." Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And for the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of the moment, of everything that had brought them here, and everything that could still come. They weren't there yet, but they were on the right path. "Then we take it one step at a time," Nathaniel said, his voice steady. "And whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." Lily looked up at him, her eyes softening just slightly. "One step at a time," she repeated, as if trying the words on for size. Nathaniel nodded, the tension in his chest easing, though he knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and there would be more battles to fight, both with the world and with themselves. But for the first time, he felt a sense of clarity, a sense of possibility. They had a chance, and that was all he needed. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Nathaniel smiled, his heart light with the knowledge that this was only the first step. But it was a step, and that was enough. For now. And as the door to the Savory Spoon swung open, the soft sound of the bell above the door chiming, Nathaniel knew that the future was uncertain. But whatever happened, he was ready. Together, they would face the storm and whatever came after, one step at a time. Chapter 15. A perfect love story. Days after their conversation felt different, not lighter, not easy, just different. Nathaniel found himself more aware of the small things in life, the little moments he had overlooked in the rush of his business-driven existence. The sound of the bell above the door of the Savory Spoon, the soft clink of silverware, the quiet hum of conversation, it all seemed more meaningful now. There was a rhythm to it, a pulse he had missed in his previous life. Lily hadn't changed overnight, but she was trying, and for Nathaniel, that was enough. The walls between them had started to come down, slowly, brick by brick. They spoke more often, sharing small moments and quiet laughter, but there was still a space between them, a quiet tension that neither of them could fully name, though they both felt it. It was the past, the weight of everything that had come before them, the baggage of history that neither of them could escape. But Nathaniel had made his choice. He wasn't going anywhere, and now he was ready to prove that to her. It was the night of the grand opening of his new restaurant, and the town was buzzing. Nathaniel had decided to make it more than just a business event. He wanted it to be something that brought the community together. His restaurant, though competitive with the Savory Spoon, wasn't about taking over. It was about proving that both could thrive side by side, that there was room for both traditions and progress. The storm of competition had passed, but now it was time for something new to bloom. Lily had agreed to attend, but only as a guest. Nathaniel had insisted that this night was about her, about showing her that they were in this together. She had hesitated, but finally she'd agreed. Nathaniel stood at the entrance of his new restaurant, waiting for her. His heart was beating faster than usual, a nervous excitement stirring in his chest. He knew the stakes this night wasn't just about the restaurant. It was about him and Lily, about their future, whatever that might look like. When she arrived, dressed in a simple but elegant dress, Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. She was radiant, her smile a little softer, her eyes a little warmer. She looked different, not just physically but emotionally, as if the weight of the past few weeks had begun to lift. "You made it," Nathaniel said, his voice soft, but there was a warmth in his words that only she could hear. "I wouldn't miss it," Lily said with a quiet smile, her eyes flicking to the bustling room. "I can't believe you pulled all this off," Nathaniel shrugged, trying to hide the nerves in his chest. "I had a little help," he said, his gaze meeting hers. "But it's not about what I've done. It's about what we can do, together." Lily's smile faltered for just a moment before she looked away, her eyes drifting to the crowd. "We're not there yet," she said quietly. "But maybe we could be." Nathaniel stepped closer to her, his voice low but filled with sincerity. "We will be. One step at a time." Lily met his gaze, her eyes softening just slightly. "I think I could get used to this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Nathaniel could respond, a loud cheer erupted from across the room, signaling the start of the evening's festivities. The crowd, a mix of town locals and invited guests, had gathered around the main stage for the opening speeches. Nathaniel knew the night would be filled with small moments of tension, of doubts, but he also knew it would be the first step towards something bigger, towards something real. He took Lily's hand gently, offering her a smile. "Let's do this together." Lily squeezed his hand back, her smile hesitant but genuine. "Together," she repeated as the night unfolded. Nathaniel could see the people of Willow Creek warming to him, to his vision. He wasn't just some outsider anymore. He was part of the town's future. And as he glanced over at Lily, standing by his side, he knew they were both on the verge of something new, something they hadn't anticipated, but were both ready to embrace. The speeches came and went, the laughter and clinking glasses echoing in the air. But amid all the noise, it was the quiet moments that stuck with Nathaniel, the moments when Lily looked at him, her gaze soft and open, as if she had finally begun to trust him with more than just her business. But her heart as the evening drew to a close. The crowd began to thin, and the lights in the restaurant dimmed. Nathaniel found himself standing beside Lily on the balcony, watching the town below. The stars shone brightly above them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, everything seemed possible. Lily turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "You know," she said softly, her voice carrying an unexpected weight, "I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I'd be able to trust anyone like this again. But maybe I was wrong." Nathaniel's heart swelled with emotion. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "You don't have to trust me overnight, Lily. I know we still have a long way to go, but I'm not going anywhere, and I'll be here, no matter what comes next." Lily's lips parted as if she wanted to say something more, but for a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if they were both waiting for the other to make the first move, to finally close the distance that had existed between them for so long. And then, with a quiet, gentle smile, Lily leaned in, pressing her lips to his. It wasn't a grand gesture, no declaration of love. It was simple, tender, real. When they pulled apart, Nathaniel felt something shift inside him, something that had been missing before. They weren't perfect, they weren't whole, but they were finally on the same page. They had made it through the storm, and now, together, they could build something beautiful, something lasting. "I think we're getting there," Lily said softly, her hand resting gently against his chest. Nathaniel smiled, his heart light. "I know. It's a perfect love story, isn't it?" Lily chuckled softly, her eyes sparkling with a mix of affection and amusement. "Maybe, but it's our story, and that's enough for me." As they stood together on the balcony, the soft breeze ruffling their hair, Nathaniel realized that, for the first time in his life, he had everything he needed. He had found something real in Willow Creek, something that could last, a love that that was built on trust, on patience, and on the promise of tomorrow. And together, they would face whatever came next.